All right, we're really on now, guys. So, all right, I got to make up some time because I don't want to eat away at the break. But today I was going to talk about, we had an interesting day today. We heard from Google, right? A large global content provider, talking about, all the things that they're doing to deliver content and why. And at the end of the day, I mean, you think about, what an incredible company, incredible products and services driving a lot of revenue. Underneath all of that, they actually showed some network maps and they showed some technology that they deploy, in order to help deliver that content. So what I want to do is kind of, give you guys a little visibility into, us Ciena. If you're not familiar with who Ciena is, I hate these slides, but just a real minute or two on, Ciena sells, technology. If you think of fiber optic cable and you think of what's connected to it, what's driving a tremendous amount of bandwidth through those cables, our technology is in there. It's in most of the largest global networks, from the global content providers, through the data center operators, through the carriers, through the CDN operators, right? It's in there. We operate, around the globe, kind of probably excluding China. I think that's the only market that we really don't sell into. And, with a large amount of customers. So we're in there, we're inside the infrastructure, just so you know who we are. And I'll just give you a perspective. What comes from being, in our role is that we get to talk to the global content guys, the CDN guys, the carriers, about what they want, what they need. And I'll give you a little bit perspective on what the role of the network, how the network can make video quality better, for a CDN or to satisfy customers, right? So the way we look at the value chain, I'm going to focus the conversation on the right hand, on the delivery side, but there's a lot that's going on in what we call the video value chain, right? From the creation of content all the way through the delivery to the end users. There's a large transition that's happening there, and I think if you went back a decade ago, you had a lot of different disparate technologies. You had specialized, video switching and routing equipment. You had, SONET and SDH, platforms delivering transport services in the carrier environment. And then along came cloud, and there's a unification that's happening. There's IP, Ethernet that are underpinning, the change. The carriers have made that migration. The video market's making that migration. What that's doing is that's unifying this value chain on common technologies, allowing you to build applications around it that can help deliver better quality of experience to users. So we'll talk a little bit more about the right-hand side. So I'm going to kind of stay in the content delivery and content, distribution, value chain. And we'll just talk a little bit about the past, present, and future, some of the things we've seen happen and where we see it going. So, if you go back in time a little bit, the original internet, to the carrier perspective and, the service provider world, it was a best effort, extra service that they sold. They sold connectivity, and they had their voice and their data private line products, and along came internet, and it was constructed in what we would term as best effort, right? If it worked, it worked. If the traffic got through, it got through. We were all very used to the little hourglass, the spinning hourglass, and times have changed. And if you think of the present, where we are now, CDNs have changed, the way that operate, right? That we don't get that we don't wait. No one really likes to wait. In fact, people abandon and leave the content pretty quickly if you don't serve it to them fast. And CDNs are a large foundation of that. In fact, what has happened is that underneath all this, I'll talk a little bit more about some of the protocols and network technology, things that have changed to enable a lot of these companies to use the network to make the internet work better. But now we expect something different from the internet. It's becoming a mission critical application. And when you look at the future, we're starting to talk about entering into a real time, world where it's responsive. It's not latency is the worst. It has been a bad thing for a while. Well, it only gets worse as we get to more and more virtual reality and augmented reality and whatever the smart people in Silicon Valley and other parts of the world are going to invent, right? We no longer will anyone want to wait or have the patience to, for content to be delivered and to be delivered with quality. So, what we're seeing and hearing is that it's absolutely a mission critical, service now. It's a lifeline service. If my entire e-commerce engine for my business is in the cloud, I must have access to it all the time. So, big transition in a decade from a best effort, secondary service to, the main engine of e-commerce and to all the appliances and technologies that we like to use today. So if I take a little technology spin, on it for a minute, and I know many of you might not be familiar, and excuse me if I go into what I like to call Ciena speak. We inside a company sometimes you speak your own language, but I talked a little bit about the transitions that have happened, right? I said, you had the past where you had Sonnet and SDH, and you had these networks that carriers had made tremendous investments in, and they're sweating those investments and trying to let them run their course and transition them out. There was this whole movement to through the Metro Ethernet Forum and the evolution of carrier networks to Ethernet, so they could retire any of these old Sonnet or legacy time domain technologies. That successfully happened. There's still plenty of SDH and Sonnet sprinkled around the globe and still faithfully serving many of our customers today. But that transition into into the present has actually enabled them to start to think about new types of services, dynamic services, programmable services, and it's also opened the door to lots of folks like the global content providers and the CDN operators to leverage our types of technologies, because it's more like a data center or IT type platform that's not specialized, that is not high price, and it's not hard to configure. So there's a simplicity, and we actually see a future for it where it's got one more step of analytics overlaid on it, where now what you're thinking about is the end user experience. So the quality of experience of the users of so we heard level 3 talking about the how they watch the video and the performance of the applications, and the network can play a large role. I'll go into some specifics on how you can actually apply network technologies directly to affect the quality of experience today. But we do see a future where the network tools are responsive, and technologies like virtualization and analytics can actually help an operator react to something or predict something and make changes and let the network respond autonomously to whatever is coming next, right? So the change, and I don't know if it's apparent to many. I don't know how many have dealt with like the public internet or how the internet was actually constructed, but this is an illustration of sort of where the internet was, right? If you picture those tubes or those cylinders, one that says transit, then I have wired access and mobile access. They're extremely hierarchical, right? You would enter one of these networks, right? Either from the content publisher's perspective, right? You publish your content, you'd have to ride through a hierarchy of network to get to a data center or cloud location or a peering location to be able to ultimately distribute that to the users. The same thing on the consumer side. So coming from the bottom of the diagram, you had these many layers. That created a very latent, unpredictable, sort of environment, network environment that could not offer quality of experience, to the users. You did not have the ability to control all of those variables. So the subtlety that I have there is that, you see quality of service. The transit networks that were put together by some of the largest carriers have now been overbuilt by some of the largest global content providers, and that was because there was an inability to provide a quality of service or a guarantee that the content was going to get moved from one city to another and published successfully to a user, right? So we've we've evolved, right? And on the access side, the bottom half of that diagram, the ISPs, that, you can think of that as all your internet service providers and your mobile network operators. There still is a hierarchy, and a complexity, and they have trouble guaranteeing your quality of service. So the sale there is buy more bandwidth. That'll fix the problem, but it's still not improving your latency or potentially even improving the quality of the video that you're consuming. So I used a little reference of a light bulb there, like, that's a wonderful incandescent light bulb. The products that it sold for years was light, right? And it's now been improved, and the reason I bring that up is say, we now all accept LED light bulbs. They're great. They cost a little bit more, but they still produce light. They last a hell of a lot longer, and they're a lot more efficient, right? So this is sort of what we see how the internet is transforming now, right? You end up with the content owners driving content deeper, using network technologies, and I had mentioned one before. Ethernet was a transition that was important. DCI is an acronym for data center interconnection that we use in our business. So a lot of smart people in the data center business and in the cloud business that understand where a content archive is and where their origin locations are, and they will use these direct fiber, high performance, high speed connections to distribute that content to push it closer to the users. And what you end up seeing is I have two other acronyms on there too. Mobile Edge Compute, the MEC. So that's pushing the storage and compute resources even farther and closer to the users. And virtual CDN. This is all creating a distributed sort of content environment where now, if you think about that as a user, the hierarchy, the complexity, the latent behavior, that's all removed. It enables a better performance. It enables content owners to actually monetize their services better, whether it's searches, if they serve up advertising, or they have subscription based products. They can actually provide better quality services that way. And this is sort of forcing the industry to look at overall end-to-end quality of experience, not what they used to call the quality of service SLA. Quality of service SLA meant I bought 100 megabit per second internet service, and I was guaranteed to only lose a small percentage of the traffic, right? That's not good enough for video. The video, you need to know that, hey, they didn't abandon, they were engaged, they stayed tuned, and they did not rebuffer. This is a very different type of metric. So we see a transition to all these technologies driving a distributed cloud environment, enabling content to be pushed farther and closer to the users, and the metrics themselves actually being based on quality of experience. And with that, I promised I'd make up some time. We had a lot of good technical issues up front here. I thank my IT department for the antique computer and the old VGA interface. So, but with that, I'll take any questions if there are anything about anything I covered. Oh, got one in the back.
In terms of your analytics, do you have a sort of a definition of what you call QoE versus QoS? I mean, you just did a very
Well, yeah. So that's a very good question, because the way we look at QoE coming from the network technology provider's perspective, right? There's a lot of different variables that have to be considered when you're looking at QoE. So QoS, right, was just how many bits, how long they took, how many made it there successfully, right? Kind of very simple way of looking at it. QoE would use that as one of the data points. It would probably have to look at things like, hey, what's the health of the servers that either the origin or the edge cache servers or the edge appliance, like how are they performing, right? What are the other, and then there's a correlation that has to happen, like so a little bit more thinking about all of the different types of technologies that live in that topology. So I think it's a degree more sophisticated, but what it does is it actually lets the storage and compute resources and the application-based resources work with the network. And if you put those four together, you end up with a new quality of experience metric that is something that I think a carrier network operator would find useful, because they could now go in and say, hey, listen, I need to now reconfigure the network a certain way because of some usage patterns, or I see that there's a congestion point in this peering point or peering fabric. Let me now build some more resources. Or, hey, the trouble is actually emanating from content that's published on this CDN. Let me talk to that partner and fix that problem first. Or, hey, customer, you got a bad appliance. You can't even locally cache anything. You don't have enough room on your phone to queue that video, right? So I think it becomes a broader set, and that's still to be defined, because I think there's a perspective to take into consideration. If you're a content owner, you'll have some metrics that you need to make sure you're driving your business, you're driving your revenue appropriately. When you're a network operator, you're going to need to know all these things that could be affecting your revenue, and be able to hopefully get in front of that and preempt it. Make sense? Any other questions? All right. Well, I think I stayed on time. How'd I do? I took my technology off because I didn't want it interrupting me while I was up here. I didn't need anything else, but all right. Thank you, everybody.